Hi everyone. As promised, I'm putting together, I think in this case for SketchUp, it'll be a series of two tutorials, part one and part two, about how to uh, proceed with the phase three detailed design of your community open space. Devin's been kind enough to loan me his model, SketchUp model, that has his housing and roads, and all this is cut in. Now, the first thing you want to be able to do, and there's a couple different ways to do this, is whatever area you're going to be working on, you need that to be back to the kind of existing landform that it was, or if you regraded it as part of phase two. But you don't want it to be split up. Like in this case, the roads are all separated from the sidewalks, which is what you need to do eventually. But since we're starting with a new design that's different from probably your original schematic designs, you really want this entire area to be free from being split up. And if you have a few areas like this that are in there, that's easy enough. You can just go in with, if I turn on the hidden geometry, you can see there's just some unsmooth lines there. So if I click on that, I can remove those. And just now, if I really look carefully down along this edge, you'll see there's actually a little bit of the terrain is kind of messed up there too. But I'm not going to worry about that for this demonstration. And then I can use the paint bucket with the Alt key, just pick that up and get rid of those things. So those lines are still there. They're just like the rest of the terrain mesh. They're just smoothed off and hidden. So what we want is this one area to be free of any of those other divisions, because now that you have a new and more detailed design, we want to be able to go through and place surfaces and structures within this and regrade this to match the new design that you're working with. Now, in this case, as I said, it works out really nicely because this is already cut off from the rest of the model by virtue of its position between the roadways. If you had another position, another area that you wanted to work on, and I had worked through this a little bit previously, there's a way to kind of subdivide this that's really quick and easy. Now you can use the drape command, but I'm going to go in here. This is grouped. I'm going to explode this. And if you wanted to find another separate area, I'm just going to use the pencil tool. I'm just using this as an example. So I'm going to start on the surface. I don't really care if the line cuts through. I just need to have a series of lines that are connected together. Oh, sorry. I'm going to back up here. Yeah. What I do want to do now is group this. So I'm double clicking, group it. I don't want these lines that I'm drawing to get connected to that in terms of the geometry. So I don't care if they cut through it. There we go. Now you can see it's not trying to stop the line tool because it's not actually connecting to any geometry within that group. Okay, so there we go. In that, I'm going to select those lines and use a plugin that's really helpful here. It's called Extrude Lines Vector by 2 Points by TIG. Available online, and I'll provide a copy of it through Canvas so you can get to it. And you just pick one of these corners and tilt your view up if you need to. So we get the blue axis, and it essentially just extrudes a fence-like structure up. So now I'm going to triple click on that and make that a group. This will just make it easier to handle later on. I'm going to cut that, open this group up, use paste in place, and then just use the move tool, slide that straight down along the blue axis. And now if I shift select the surface, right click and choose Intersect Faces with selection, select this shape, delete it. Now you can see I've got that little cutout inside that group. And if I want to back outside of here, I can always explode that back out. And with the hidden geometry not showing, I have a separate piece. So you could run that right down the middle of a roadway and cut that out. So it's really up to you. If your model is well organized, you can hide all the buildings, and you can work within your community space and turn these off and on as you need to be able to see the context. And I would just make sure you hide everything else. In this case, if I zoom to extents, I have a 2D version, which I'll talk about, and this 3D model, and it should still work pretty quickly. If you've got things organized, you can turn off the buildings. You want to have much freedom to navigate around as you start working with this, because we'll be doing a lot of more detailed work with the terrain inside of here. Okay, so if you need to separate geometry, that's how you do it. In this case, it's already ready to go. So the next step for me is As I mentioned, I want to have this 2D version, which these schematic site options were part of the original model that I provided for you, but I've also come back in just using the AutoCAD file Devin provided and brought in this boundary so it matches the edge of the roads down on the 3D model. But I want to start with the 2D version because that's how I can map an image on there. And this case, that's what I'm going to use. If you've already drawn up all your geometry in AutoCAD, you can import that, create the 2D surfaces, and then from that point on, the process is the same. In this case, I'm actually going to trace over a design sketch. And as I start building that in SketchUp, I'll start refining some of those shapes because since it was a freehand sketch. And again, this tutorial, this set of tutorials isn't intended to be the 10 steps you need to finish phase 3 of your community design project. It's really about process. I just want you to start thinking about the modeling process and what you need to do first. Second, how these different steps relate to each other. You've got the basic skills. A lot of this is review to things I've already gone over in other tutorials. It's just that I want you to really pay attention to the process that I'm going through here. Okay, so I've got my 3D terrain site separated. I have a 2D version of it here. And if I flip over to Photoshop, here's the sketch Devin provided. And I've just gone through with the crop tool and just cropped it down so it's close to the right size. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect when we take it into SketchUp. I've already exported this as a PNG file, so it's ready to go. And I'll probably just minimize that. So I have this area grouped for now, so I'm going to go inside that group. I was actually having trouble mapping this on here without it being grouped. I'm not sure, still a little perplexed as to why that was, but inside the group it seems to work fine. Make sure you have your image option set to texture. Locate the image, here's my site plan, import, and I can just double click on that for now and place it right on there. So in this case, to scale it up, I could use floating. If you have a very angular site or rectangular site, you could use the floating pin method to snap it out to the corners. Since this is kind of an organic shape, I'm simply going to right-click, texture, position, and I'm just going to scale this, keep it kind of oriented the same direction, move it over here until I get it about the right size shape. I think that's kind of the outer edge of the sidewalk, so I'm getting close. And again, since it's a loose sketch, it's probably not going to fit perfectly, but you can adjust it. I'm kind of looking at this corner over here, this corner over here. I'd say that looks pretty good. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get any closer than that. Okay, and if I orbit, you can see that snaps in there. Looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to right click and choose done. And then actually I'm going to pop out of this right now and explode this group just so I can manipulate it a little bit easier. So now I've got my new schematic, my design sketch placed onto that site. And I'll talk about, we'll work up here first, but for right now, I also want to right click on this, go texture and projected. Then I can use my paint bucket tool, hold the Alt key down, pick that up. Come down here and left click on that, and now you can see that's kind of fits everything on there. And this is why I've really been encouraging y'all to work in 3D. Devin has a water feature going down the hill here and a set of stairs and then a ramp. I think these are some community gardens and raised beds and a pathway through what's going to become a wooded area. And out here, this is going to be meadow. And there's this more rectangular water feature, falls down into a pond. Now, we talked about this in class about maybe even bringing this pond, tucking in around here so that it's a little more related to a kind of exercise health center here. Also, when you actually put it down on the site, you can see that the water is flowing uphill, which doesn't work too well. So although in plan view at 2D it looked like this could work, you'd have to do some serious grading to make that happen. And even with tucking it around the corner, you can see we're going to have to change some grades. I think this was supposed to be a little boardwalk or observation deck up here, and I'll show you more images about that in part 2. But so he's got everything sketched in there. Now we can start understanding. If we navigate down here, you can see that there is a nice bit of fall from the road up there all the way down here. So his water feature and stairs are definitely going to work in there, but we don't know exactly how the heights are going to work. And we've got our building kind of placed in here as well. So before trying to do anything on this, process steps, basically we're going to do a little analysis. We want to think about surfaces and structures, and I'm going to explain what that means here. So a structure would be like this water feature, or this series of stairs, or the ramp, or this water feature here, which again he's got sketched in there. But there's a single line here. Something has to hold this up. So there's probably a wall. There's got to be some thickness there. So those are all structures that, generally speaking, if they're level or if they're sloping uniformly, that I would model right off of this 2D surface, create groups out of them, and then drop those down onto the terrain model and manipulate the landform to match those as best as possible, and manipulate the structure to match the landform. But kind of, you go back and forth. A surface would be like the forest floor here, these pathways, the meadow areas, anything that's going to sit directly on the landform that you would do grading and then put a subbase and then create the pathway or surface. Planting beds, for example, lawn areas, anything like that. What we want to be able to do eventually is create that geometry up here, drape it onto the landform so that we can apply different materials to it, and then we render it using V-Ray. It shows up at high resolution, and we can understand the difference between the base plane materials. However, what we want to be able to do, okay, let's take this pathway, for example. We can see here it's a nice kind of curvilinear meandering pathway going through what will be a woodland area. But if we get down here on site and look at that same area, you can see there's quite a cross slope on there right now. So although the general flow of this kind of comes up, down a little bit, there's a tree house here, it goes up the slope, comes back down around. It's actually a nice sequence that you can judge and evaluate, but we can also see that, here, a bit of a cross slope. This pathway kind of goes flat, steep, and then flattens out. So maybe we want to blend that out a little bit more, and that's what we're going to use the artisan tools for. So using this image, we can regrade the site, and then once it's completely regraded, then the surfaces can be draped, and we'll drop the structures down so we can work in any regrading around the structures that's necessary before we actually drop them into place. So that's the process. Again, nothing new, steps I've gone over before, but it's just a way to keep things organized and keep things simple as you go through this more detailed phase. Okay, now one of the things I've done here is I created, the building is still, I think, evolving as part of its design, so I created essentially a footprint for this building. And the first thing I'm going to do is select that footprint and this site and do my intersect faces with selection. So if I move this back up in the air and switch to my surface, you can see that looks like there's a little break in there, but that's okay. I just want to really make sure that the exterior of the building walls, because walkways, the water feature, everything's going to connect into this building. So you need to start with an outline of that as a way to separate that from the rest of the surface. So we know that when we start connecting these pathways in and things, that we're going to go parallel off that building. You can see the sketch isn't quite parallel there, but we can work from that existing building, and we can adjust the building to sit right on top of that. Okay, so let's say maybe the first thing I'm going to come down here and put in is this water feature, maybe over to the bridge here. So since this is kind of separate from this, even if it flows together, I'm going to model those two things separately, since this probably will be graded into the landform, and this is going to have walls around it to create this structure as it steps down the hill. So I'm going to switch over to my arc tool, and again, come up here the best I can. Maybe I'm going to start out at the edge here, and then I can come back in a little bit later. Now, one of the things I didn't do, since I'm starting from scratch, is I picked the arc tool. It's important that I notice I need a lot more than 12 sides. I'm going to go up to like 60 sides because I want this to be nice and clean. And again, I'm going to see technically his idea, I think, was one kind of big arc that comes down here. Let's just see how that works. And if I zoom out, I can see, well, it gets me pretty close, and that keeps it simple. So I think I'm just going to go with that arc. Again, I pulled off the side here, but that's okay. The idea is that we're going to refine this as we go through. So this next one comes down to there. Okay. Now I still got the thick lines there because I haven't connected it up to anything. So I'm going to pull the tape measure in here and just pull some guidelines off because I want this water feature to kind of flow off the building, just like some of these things here. So I'm going to pull off some of these lines just to make sure that I'm consistent. And I'm not checking them now, but if you want to double check across what is the distance between here and here, that's 6.67 feet. So maybe I'd want to make that 6 feet or 8 feet to round that number off. Okay, and now also when I start doing that, I can start seeing some other things that this is close to being there, but it's a little offset. On the other hand, I see a line here that represents, maybe there's another line back there along the edge. So maybe I'm going to come out here and snap right to there and use that as my line. All right, so now I'm going to switch to line tool. I'm just going to come out here. Now this alignment, sometimes you'll find this alignment is very close to being on the main axes, but it isn't. So when I know that, I get perpendicular, hold the shift key down, and then snap to there, because if I'm really trying to stay right along that line, and sometimes you're going to get that green axis. So even if I have to go the other way, hold the shift key down, snap it back to there. And again, since the sketch is it's not perfect. All right, hold the shift key, snap to there. All right, so this is falling a little short. Hold the shift key, snap to there, snap to there, snap to there. And since I don't have a guide there, I just want to make sure I'm maintaining that. I'm not exactly sure how that edge works, but I'm going to stay consistent with, there we go, hold the shift key. I'm just going to average this off. And I'm thinking this might be well, I'll just go perpendicular to there. And again, SketchUp sometimes just changing your view a little bit. I don't want that red axis, I want a perpendicular axis. And then since I've started modeling this, I'm going to try to use some of the other lines. In this case, I don't think I'm going to go all the way out to there. And part of the idea is, as you're doing this, what you sketched may have looked nice, and now you're realizing, well, that's creating a really narrow line, narrow width of the water there. So maybe I want to back that up a little bit. And then as I come down through here, come back out to there. Again, this one's kind of tricky. It's just off parallel to the main axis, so you have to fight the snapping a little bit to get it to work. Okay, and I'm on that line, hold the shift key, find the endpoint, find the endpoint. There we go. So when I get done, now I can double click that. If I switch back to get off my materials, I can see that I've got that entire structure outlined. Okay, so that's one of my examples of a structure. I haven't put the lines across here yet, but I'm going to double click on that, right click, and make it a group. Okay, so now I can come in there, turn my texture back on, and I can kind of start refining this a little bit. And again, I don't know, in this case, you might have had arcs in mind there, but if I just go perpendicular, close that off, and then I'm going to come in through here. These are kind of waterfall steps that come down. I'm just trying to get kind of perpendicular, and they may have to move around a bit. They may not, again, he sketched those in there, but once we actually put this on the landform, we may decide, you know, there's maybe a better place to put that. Maybe we need an additional one in. Trying to kind of approximate coming off of the radius point where I can, and then another one here. Maybe there's another one there. Okay. Now, the other thing I can do with this, and I usually save these 2D versions just so that I'm going to delete that piece out of there. So if I have a problem, I can come back up here and fix it. But what I'm going to do is just get the push-pull. I'm going to pull that up and just double-click. And yeah, that looks a little big, but that's okay. All right, so now I've got that just created as a structure. And what I'm going to do is take that one and maybe I'll even just move that down. Well, actually, the quickest way to do that, I've got my Drop GC plugin, so I can right click on that, say Drop GC, and it's still connected. So I have to make sure that's not happening. Let's just move it down and make a copy of it. Okay, now I've got that copy separated. Drop that down. Somehow I got that connected there, so I'm not sure what happened to that. Shape has been weird. All right, solve that problem. Let's just get rid of this. Don't need any of those lines anymore anyway. All we need is that interior site. Okay, so we've dropped this down onto our landform, and as you would probably expect, maybe I gave it a little too much height, but that's okay. Hold the shift key down. I'm going to drop this down to, you know, if this isn't the walkway, maybe it can stick up a little bit. But now you can see at least we're coming off of there about street level. Again, it's a design judgment. Should this be flush? Should this be up a little bit? I'm going to leave it up a little bit. And then every place in here where we start seeing an elevation change, we can use our push-pull. Snap to there. And again, as a design method, the first time I may not be really paying attention to exactly what I'm kind of looking at the existing landform. Saying how much I need to adjust this down. Now the other thing you've noticed too, we're looking at this as a stepping down the hill here, but we don't really we haven't really decided how the walls are going to fit. So right now it's just one big block, but again, that's fine to start that way. Just snapping these down. So now you can see how much that's sitting above the ground here. So maybe if you want that sitting up that much, if I step this down too much further, undo that. Oh, that's not too bad there. So maybe there is a step here. This one goes up a bit. And again, you can come in here and check some elevations between the top and the bottom and figure out exactly how much per step if you want to make it even, or maybe you don't want to make it even. Maybe you want a little bit of change from one of those to the other. But that allows us to actually make those design decisions once we've got that placed in on the site itself, and we can see how that fits and works its way down the hill. Now, the other option we have, of course, is once we've got that basically set, we can come in here and regrade the site. If we decide, well, maybe this is the way this is sitting up here, that we really want the grading to come up to meet this more uniformly all the way around there. And since this is all still one surface, right now, we can turn the hidden geometry on, and we could come in here maybe with the artisan select tool. And I'm just going to come in and select those pieces that are around the edge. And the first thing I'm going to do is subdivide those, maybe even a little more, so that we have a little more ability to fine tune that. Now you notice that when I did that, I lost my texture. It's okay. Just turn the hidden lines off, pick up this, reapply it. Since it's projected, it'll fit right in there. And we can turn the hidden geometry back on and maybe use the sculpt tool to come in here. Again, hit the escape key to get rid of that. I'm going to bring this down a little bit. And I can just come in here and manipulate this. And I have the auto smooth function on, so it's, you see when it comes in and does a little smoothing, and it also will help if I come out here a little bit. Again, really interactive way to come down through here. This pathway is supposed to kind of come up through there. And of course, it's going to manipulate on the other side too, where I have some stairs coming through. But now I can think about, maybe I still need to ramp this up a little bit, but at least I can kind of see how that's working through there. And just making a visual decision how that works in there. And then when I'm done, I can right click, switch over to my smooth tool, maybe widen this up a little bit and increase the influence, and just kind of come in here and blend this together. And it's kind of the ultimate way to do grading, where you can really just manipulate that until it fits in. So now you can see, instead of on the other side, I still have a lot more space, but I'm going to have a set of steps that come down here, so it's not really critical I adjust too much in there. When I get out to the ramp, maybe I am, but now that looks like that fits right in there. We can continue to adjust this. Maybe we build a structural ramp that comes up and crosses over. There's supposed to be, I guess, a bridge over that one, so the water surface could actually drop down a little bit there. But once again, that's the design decisions you can make once you actually place this on the site. You understand what the grading and what the terrain looks like. Now, I also might want to come in here once I've got that set and come inside the water feature itself, and maybe pull off an inset there, so maybe 0.5 feet, 6-inch wall there, and then I can do the push-pull, and start dropping that down a little bit, and start looking at different materials that I might apply to those surfaces. So again, same thing here. I can come in here with the offset, 0.5 feet, and then I can start, if I'm trying to come across to these surfaces, I can perpendicular. Okay, I missed something there. Again, it makes it a little trickier on this one because it's so close. Like this is, since these aren't exactly parallel, can't get rid of that, but I can push that one down to there. And if I want to, oops, Okay, so if I and there I start to create that little bit of a waterfall in there. And what I'll show in the second part of this tutorial, you can add boulders in there, change the water surface. I'm not going to do that here. I'm really just talking about how to create these different structures, and I can go over a couple other ones. I don't want to spend a lot of time going through every single one, but let's spend a little more time than maybe working with Artisan, just talking about the grading that we're going to do, and then hopefully it'll be pretty straightforward. So this, let's just look at this path in here. It's the one that I said also that, you know, there's a lot of cross slope there. It might work as a trail through the woods, but if we just turn the hidden geometry on, again, this is an area where I would use the Artisan Select tool and just select all these areas. And subdivide that, and probably subdivide it again. And I'll just focus on that right now. So again, turn the hidden geometry off just for a bit, pick up the pattern, place it back down. Let's go back to the sculpt tool, hit escape to get rid of that, and let's turn on the hidden geometry again. So this is an area where we could come in a little closer. As it's coming through here, you know, we could decide, well, if I really want to kind of clean that up, I'm going to narrow this in a little bit. I'm just going to come around the curve here and maybe start by taking this. It's pretty good there. Maybe this one in here. And I'm going to use the make planar function. In this case, I'm going to choose XY. It's just going to level it out so it creates a little terrain or a terrace there. And then I can go back to my sculpt tool, hit escape out of there. And this is one case where maybe I might even be able to just use the smoothing function. I'm just right clicking and blend that in. So I've got these over here. If I don't really want that to make it look like it's completely flat, I can come in here and pull this up a little bit. See, there's a big jump here. Just kind of go around that curve there. You can see it's just slightly pulling it up. So now it's a little more level, but it still has a little cross slope to it. Again, there actually are existing trees in this site, so this is the case where if you keep it really tight, you can do some manipulation without losing a lot of the trees. So now you can see also here, that's a little more uniform, and maybe this is a case where I'm going to reduce this a bit, switch to sculpt, maybe pull this up a bit through here. And this is a case where I don't really, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple, so I'm not going to subdivide this. I don't need more detail there, so I'm not going to put it in there. And again, step this up, switch to smooth. Let's come in here and blend that in a little bit. Okay, so it's really important that you go through and kind of do this process before, as I mentioned, before you split the terrain. You've got the image on here, and if you had drawn something up in AutoCAD and you had the vectors, then just export it or plot it as a PDF, or do a snipping tool, screen capture, just get an image of it and map it onto the surface. That way you can do all this grading beforehand, and then once we split this, we'll have it ready for the materials. And you just have to keep looking around and adjusting things to make sure that everything's fitting. So that looks pretty good. You can still see we have a big cross slope there, but you know, I might come in with that and down into here. Yeah, I'm gonna have to subdivide that. It's a little too coarse. So let's just take this and subdivide it. Subdivide it again. Place that back on there. Now let's go with our select tool and escape. So since I have that big gap there, let's take my hidden geometry back on. I'm going to start down here, not all the way down, but kind of from there to here. And select this. And let's try make planar, but just use best. So you can see it kind of averaged that slope out. So I got a little bit of a dip there. But that gave me a nice, much better uniform slope down there. And then if I go back to my sculpt tool and smooth, hit escape on this, and I can come in here. Just blend that off a little bit. If I have to pull this up a little bit, I can switch to sculpt. And then switch back to smooth. Yeah, now maybe right here, I've got a pretty uniform slope, a little bit of a cross slope there, but that actually, yeah, it's still a little bit of a dip there. So I probably want to actually use my sculpt tool and push that. Okay, so it comes up around now. That's kind of leveled out that intersection a little bit more. Switch back to my smooth tool. Got stuck there. Okay, let's go to all right. Again, it's just like molding clay. You want to adjust it. If you wanted to add berms or anything else in there, you could go in and do that as well. So I'm not going to go through this whole process. I just want you to understand how you can use that artisan tool really effectively to do all your grading. So pay attention to all those things. Again, this pond is a good example of it's really kind of going uphill there. So if we want to really tuck it back into here, I have to subdivide this and break it down. And I have another model where I've actually done that. I'll show you how that worked out in there. Okay, let's turn those off for now. All right, so once we have an area graded like that, then it's the same process. Instead of dropping a shape down, what I'm going to do, I'm not going to take the time to do in this tutorial, I would trace this outline of the shape and then use the drape command to drape that onto the surface. And since I have another model with that done, I'm not going to do that. Let's see if I can move this down. All right, just delete that. But anyway, that's what I mean by the difference between surfaces and structures. So anything that's going to become a surface that you need to give thickness to, it's going to basically be a man-made built structure that comes off the landform. You want to create as a group here. And then the other thing you might still do is actually drape that onto the landform once it's finished. So that way, what you may find if you're grading underneath this surface to get this to come up high enough, it may start coming up into the bottom of your water feature. And since you don't want that, you could use this structure to use that intersect faces with selection and just get rid of that piece of landform that exists underneath that structure. Because again, think about the construction process. They would excavate that, pour footings, build the walls, fill it back in. They basically do that same thing. They get rid of the structure there and replace it with a man-made structure. And that's what you need to do. Now, these surfaces over here, you know, anything that kind of defines, again, the edge of maybe what's paving and lawn or paving and meadow, you want to have all those in. If this is all one material, then you just need to make sure it's separated from these other surfaces. When you create these trails over here, there's going to be a shape that's represented, you know, out. I pull this out to the sidewalk here. You're going to have another one inside. So each of those shapes becomes a separate group that we can also use later on to apply V-Ray Fur to if you want to create grass or meadow. And we can also use that with the scatter plugin to be able to populate it with trees and plants. And I'll show that in the next tutorial. Okay, so I'm not going to take the time to go through and rebuild all these. I hope you can see that anything that, like the waterfall feature, like the steps, the ramp, those are structures that you want to trace over here, create a group out of, extrude them into 3D, drop them down onto the site, and then adjust them based on the grading that's there, or adjust the grading to accommodate them a little bit better. It kind of goes back and forth. You can adjust the slope on your ramp, but you can also adjust the landform underneath of it so it fits on there better. That's really just part of refining your original design ideas and making them fit the site. Since you're working in 2D here, you really don't understand that until you get down into your 3D model. So in the next tutorial, I will open up a more complete version of this and then show you some of the things that a couple other little tricks if you need to add a new piece of landform in, how I dealt with creating some of the meadows, placing plants, and so forth. All right, thank you.